Tana River County is situated in the southeastern part of Kenya with a 35,375.8 square kilometers of landmass and an estimated population of 240,075 people. The county is famous for hosting Tana River, which is a freshwater body that is renowned to inhabiting killer crocodiles and hippos. The Pokomos who practice farming and pastoralists Orma and Ortei are the dominant tribes of this great county. Despite hosting one of the largest freshwater bodies, Tana River County is a semi-arid area which experiences rainfall that is rarely sufficient to cater for the needs of its residents. Therefore, the nearest and most easily accessible alternative has been the waters of Tana River, which unfortunately have been more of a death trap than a solution.
Kuna shangazi yangu anaitwa Eni Kundua Jilo. Ameliwa na mamba, ni mimi nikiwa mkubwa hivi. Asubuhi kama 1:30 baba mdogo ameenda kule, ndiye aliyemuona akatoa habari. Hiyo habari ikaja mpaka mjini. Hata KWS nao wakajua. Wakaenda kumtafuta zaidi ya siku 6. Lakini asipatikane. Akapotea.
Welcome once again to Africa, the continent of hope, and today we are joined by none other than Father Peter, who's going to introduce himself and the amazing work he did with the people of Tana River. Speaking of agroecology, we're speaking about disaster risk reduction. We're also speaking about peacebuilding initiatives which brought the communities together regardless of whether they were Catholic or not. Welcome, Father Peter.
Thank you very much.
So, Father Peter, you can take this time to introduce yourself and the work that you do right now, and also some of the work that you did, just briefly.
Thank you very much. My name is Father Peter Ndegwa. I am a Holy Ghost Father. I'm a Holy Ghost Father missionary. I have been a priest for the last 28 years. During this time, I have worked in both Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And I have mostly worked among the most vulnerable people. And it is from that experience of working with the most vulnerable that I had to devise ways of empowering them and seeing how we can work together with them to solve some of the challenges that they find themselves in, especially things about the climate, climatic shocks, and all these things that affect them in their daily life.
Mimi ni mmoja wao ambao nimeathirika. Hata mimi nilikuja nikauma, na nikikumbuka kama leo. Ilikuwa 25 December, tulikuwa na mechi siku hiyo Maroni na Wenje. Baada ya mechi ndio tukateremka mtoni kuoga. Sasa kwenda pale, wengine walikuwa wanaogelea tayari. Mimi nikateremka tu maji ya magoti. Kaja kasikia kitu kinanidara. Lakini sikuelewa kwani ilikuwa ni mamba. Sasa nikatia mkono, nikafikiri ni wale ambao wanaogelea, pengine mtu amekuja anacheza na mimi, pengine anapiga mbizi. Nikatia mkono ndio nikagundua kwa ni mamba.
What is disaster risk reduction and how is it applied in the society, and how did you also implement that in Tana River area?
So when we talk about disaster, we are talking about the things that affect the community and that the community cannot cope because they are vulnerable, and because they are vulnerable, they are unable to fit and do anything good for themselves. So disaster, therefore, when we talk about risk, it means the risks that come with the disaster. The risk could involve death, it involves diseases, it involves destruction of infrastructure, it involves very many things, the risks that come with the disaster. So therefore, we talk about reduction of the disaster risk. That means how do we caution the community against these risks and the disasters that are coming. This includes preparing the community. For example, if it is about floods, announcing that floods are coming, therefore people should go to the upper grounds, also preparing to intervene when the floods come. For example, doing food for asset so that the community can be provided with seeds so that when the floods leave, the community can plant in the floods receded area. Also, when the community is affected by floods, we also give them medicine because there are several waterborne diseases. When we harvest, we also train the community on how to include or rather add value to their crops so that it can also serve them after the floods. When it rains upstream, this is the story year after year. All these bananas here, they are all going to die now. So there is actually nothing the community is going to be able to harvest. And there is no food in the farms anymore. All of it has gone by the floods. So that is why the community needs to get out of the floodplains and establish small irrigation schemes on the higher ground where where the floods cannot reach. The same to drought. When drought comes, again, we caution the community on the diseases that come along with it, the death that comes with the livestock. So these things, we caution them like giving them, we can restock. For example, during drought, we first of all destock the community. We educate the community to sell the animals when they are still looking healthy, when they still have their weight. And then when the drought goes, then we now go for restocking. So these are some of the things we do when we are dealing with the drought risk reduction. And the drought risk reduction means that we are actually solving some of the challenges that the community is undergoing and kind of saving their lives. So the first thing is to save life. So we protect life by giving them food, protecting their assets, and also giving them the things that they need to do what they are doing as a community.
Thank you, Father Peter, for that wonderful intervention that you created. So with success comes with challenges. So what were these challenges that you encountered, especially when transitioning from short-term goals, like the Food for Work program, to the long-term sustainable agroecological program?
When we have these disasters, we then do some interventions, and these interventions are the ones that lead to saving lives and they lead to stabilizing the community. So the short-term goals that we do include food for work, food for asset, cash for work, and cash also for asset. These are very important interventions because these short-term interventions stabilize the community, and when the community is stable, then what happens is that the community then is able to move on and can enter into the stage of recovery. So recovering from the disaster is when now we look for long-term solutions. For example, if we are dealing with the problem of losing livestock, then what we do is, when we restock the community, with a certain direction. For example, we introduce like a breed that we would like to promote for the community. Like we introduced the Gala goat, and this Gala goat is very good for the community because we wanted to improve its meat, its mutton, as well as the milk. The milk of the goat is very nutritious. And we chose the goats because goats are browsers. They don't eat grass on the ground. Rather, they eat the leaves on the shrubs. So they can survive during drought. And so these goats, what we did with them was to, first of all, sensitize the community about this intervention, and we restocked the community with the Gala goats, and also we brought in the aspect of the breeding aspect. And the breeding that we did with these goats was to control the Gala goat so that we only produce the Gala. And we do that by again training the community on how, first of all, to keep to rear the goats away from other breeds. If, for example, you have the East African goats, you keep them away from the Gala goats. And also you control the male ones when they are on heat, so that they cannot mount on the female ones at the wrong time or when you have not planned.
Gala goats have a reputation for surviving droughts thanks to its high resistance to opportunistic diseases that eliminate ordinary goats due to weakening body immune system.
And then we also train the community on how to keep these goats, because goats, they need to be reared on raised houses. So we train the community on how to raise the house, and when the house is raised, their waste needs to drop down, and when it drops down, then it becomes manure. But also that manure is very important because it supports if it is burnt, it kills the mosquitoes. And also when the goats stay in a raised house, they are protected from wildlife like hyenas, because there are very many hyenas and lions. But when the goat house is up, then it protects these animals from that. So we also brought in the component of the health of the goats, and the health aspect was, first of all, we brought in documentation so that we can register all the goats, keep records, keep the record of the weight of the new ones when they are born, when they are weaning, and then keep the record of all their diseases so that each goat has a card, like a clinic card, and that card is used to know, even when you want to sell your goat later, if somebody needs the details about how you have brought up the goat, then they can be able to follow what kind of diseases did it have, how was it cured, and all those things. And then during the same time, we brought in the idea of dips, because the area is full of ticks, so there were many tick-borne diseases, but also fly. So we brought in dips, and we put dips in every 3 villages so that the community can dip their animals twice per week. And also the record keeping at the dip, we also insisted it has to be well done, because each goat was to pay some money, maybe about 1 shilling, so that you can be able again to recharge the dip, and also you can be able to maintain the dip. So we had also therefore some committees for the dip, and also committees for the program. And also we also introduced the aspects of extension for the goats. So we brought in the issue of health in terms of training some paravets who could assist the community to keep the records in the village, and also the paravets would be able to treat the animals inside the villages and also control, so that when the goats are treated, the cards are with the community, and then when they bring the information, we feed the information into our computers. And then we also brought in agrovet, and we also stocked the agrovet with medicine, so that medicine can be used to supply to the community, and the paravets carries a kit of this medicine. So these aspects of the breeding were very important, and they solved a lot of problems. The challenges we faced in the beginning was when we were giving out the goats, the community thought the goats are just coming, and so there was temptation for people to take the goats and slaughter them. So we insisted that we need to have an MOU with all the members that we were giving the goats, so that you do not sell your goat before 2 years. So the first year, each goat, usually we give per household, we give 5 female goats, and for every 5 households, we give them 1 male back for breeding. So the community did not understand in the beginning that when they used this, they thought they could just take the goats and then eat them during Eid or Christmas without taking care of them. So we wrote an MOU with them that they will follow these rules, and the intention of the rules was so that they can increase their stock, because a goat gives birth twice. They give birth twice a year. So when we gave them 5 goats, by the end of the year, households had 15 because they had given birth twice. Then others, if they give birth to twins, they had more. So in the second year, now you're talking about having 20 to 25 goats. It is at that stage that now we could allow the community to now start using the goats for their needs. So because at that time the goats had gotten enough weight, they are producing a lot of milk. But now the challenge also is, when you have all these goats, what do you do with them? Because also of the impact of these goats to the environment. Because when you have too many goats, again, they deplete the soil and they can cause soil erosion. So then we train the community on common marketing, so that they can bargain for the price. I remember that we used to sell goats. For example, we sold goats to bucks, namely the male ones. We sold them like to Malindi diocese. The diocese needed male goats, so we sold them, many of them. And we had improved the quality of the goats to an extent that a goat which would have been costing 3,000 now would cost 10,000, because it was, now you are not selling the goat, you are selling the breed. So the program was very good, and also so this program solved several problems, including increasing the income of the community, because now when you sell the goat you get income. It also increased their assets in the households, because originally when we did a survey, they had very few assets in the household. So it improved and increased their assets. It also increased their dietary their dietary diversity. It also decreased their mortality, the mortality of the animals. So all these aspects were very important because they supported this breeding program, and it was a very successful program, and because of the success, the community now came to appreciate it, they came to accept it, and now everybody wanted to be involved in it because of the success it had gone through, because they could see that somebody who had 5 goats, now they have 25. They have again sold about 5. They have maybe 30, 40,000, 50,000 from that, and the income has increased greatly. So everybody now came willingly. Originally it is like we were convincing people, but now villages would come with a delegation. We want to be involved in this program of breeding. And also we used to work with the line ministry, we used to work with livestock ministry for advice, for designing of the dips, because a dip is a technical structure. So we had to follow the government rules, and we used the government to do these structures for this kind of thing. So this program was very successful, and the community appreciated it. And up to today, when you walk and go to Wenje village, rather Wenje ward now, you will see in all the corners, they will tell you, these are the goats that we started with. This, I still have 10, I still have 20 because of this program. So it had also therefore a sustainability component. So because of this, then therefore the community was empowered, and the community food security improved, and the community has learned many things, because we were also dealing with a community that were farmers. They were not animal keepers, they were not pastoralists. But also we also assisted the pastoralists, and the pastoralists also have continued to benefit from this program, and they still use the same systems that we produced. Thank you.
Thank you for that comprehensive work that you did, Father. So maybe at this point you could mention about the solar panels that were installed to promote, or rather to bring the sustainability of part of the agricultural aspect.
Such cases have in the recent past reduced, courtesy of Mission Kara Solar Irrigation Project, initiated and supervised by Father Peter Ndegwa of Wenje Parish.
The village has 120 beneficiaries who are going to benefit from about 60 acres of land, which the parish is working with them to plow and assist them to do other activities so that they can be able to plant and do everything else. Again, this was another development that had come from the community's needs. And the community's needs were brought in by the fact that, first of all, we had problems with access to water. There was no access. People were not accessing the water. They were not accessing the water because of the crocodiles. The crocodiles were there, and the crocodiles were literally killing people and eating them. Literally along the river, each house, each family, not a household, but each family would have lost somebody to the crocodile attacks. So one problem we were trying to solve was the crocodile menace, and then the floods that had come, they were sweeping away all the crops, and also the drought that was persistent was denying the community any way of food production. So therefore we worked with the community and found and decided on how to deal with how to sustainably deal with the problem of food security. And after we had lost a certain crop in 2011, 2010 there, and the community were convinced that farming along the riverbank was very risky, the community agreed that we could work with the village irrigation schemes outside the riverbanks. So we consulted the people we were working with. We consulted several engineers to design for us the kind of a pump that we need, a pump that could pump the water for about 3 kilometers and irrigate about 100 acres. So we talked to the community, we consulted the technicians, and then we worked with our donors, and they accepted that that is okay, although they were doubting because a number of partners were complaining that they had tried this program elsewhere and it had failed. So myself, I decided to risk, and we decided to provide the community with irrigation pumps that will produce about 65,000 cubic meters per hour, pump the water to the village, pump the water to the irrigation schemes. We worked on the scheme, again designed the schemes according to the government standards, and then we started the program. And we used the solar panels. We did not use the batteries, so the panels would only work during the day, and they would pump all that water there. And then the water also, because this water, when it started going to the irrigation farm, we realized that one community had been left out, namely the pastoralists, because the pastoralists also needed the water, because also they started to cut the pipes. So we had to cooperate with them, and we had to have sittings, have meetings, and ask what they needed, and they said they needed the water also. So we provided water to the community, we provided water to the villages, where they could clean it, they could put chemical in them so that the water can be used in the kitchen and also be used for livestock. So we gave them tanks, water tanks of about 20,000 liters, both the pastoralist villages and the farmers' villages. So the farmers' villages would benefit for both water for drinking and water for irrigation. For the pastoralists, they benefited for water for watering their animals and water for their drinking. And it was a very successful program also. It also lasted several years, and also it is still going on. There might have been an improvement on the water on it, because we used to dig a well next to the river, but now they are using floaters from the river direct. But it's the same system, and the program was very nice. The county government also replicated it. I know several other areas. There are some neighboring MPs came along to get it from to get the ideas, and their communities were demanding that they wanted to be like Wenje community. And some of these aspects were even mentioned in Kenyan Parliament during discussions. So it was also a very successful program.
Having successfully carried out the first phase of the solar irrigation project, Davis and Shatcliffe Company, which is a long-time solution provider and expert in water-related machines and solar panels, have again been contracted to actualize the second phase of the project in Makere village, which shares similar sentiments as those previously faced by the residents of Maroni village.
The project was meant to help the farmers increase their farm produce, because initially they have been depending on rains which in that area they are erratic, so they just come in a few months, especially most of the year they come on 2 months only. And this was not enough for them to be able to produce enough food for themselves, as well as to the other areas surrounding Tana River. So as a result of that, Holy Ghost fathers decided to come up with a project that will be able to help those farmers to be able to sustain themselves in terms of food, as well as getting income out of their farm produce. This project we used 133 panels of 160 watts, and we used a ground force pump. This other pump has a capacity of producing 36,000 liters per hour.
The water has already reached the farm, and they have also planted the seeds, so we'll be expecting to have some harvest maybe in the next 2 or 3 months.
Tumepata maji hapa ya kutumia, na huwa tutachota maji, kuoga, kupika, kufanya kila kitu. Ndio tunashukuru.
What were the lessons learned during the climate resilience interventions that you have just shared?
One thing is that it's always very important to involve the community from the design of the project, because the community was involved from the design of the project, how the project was going to be, and then working with the community along, making mistakes and accepting the mistakes.
Yes.
And after accepting the mistakes, looking for way forwards. Another lesson is when you are working with the community, you need to put structures. The structures include having committees. We introduced the idea of having committees for the irrigation schemes, committees for the pump and the piping, the committees for the village water distribution, and committee for different villages. So this committees also was a very good lesson, because when there is an issue, then the committee can meet, and it is also sustainable. They can look for interventions and solve the problem that is there. So other lessons include the fact that working with different partners, like it is very important to know that you cannot implement a project like that without involving the government in a way, because the government has a plan for the area for 5 years at least, the county integrated development plan. So you have to consult that document Then within that document, you have to see where your area is and how the aspects of interventions you want to do, how these aspects are going to fit in the whole picture. And also you have to get into the place where the decisions are made. Decisions are usually made at the count steering group, and that is where you present your project so that you do not, you avoid double funding, you avoid doing what other people, other donors are doing. So these are lessons that we learned, but also we learned that the community will always accept, appreciate, and give back when they have learned and they have been involved on these projects. Thank you very much.
Yes, for proper actualization and coordination during and after every day's work.
You did say you introduced some committees. Were these the same that you, can we say that they were the same paralegals that you introduced in the area in the peace building efforts, especially between the pastoralist community and the agro-pastoralist community? Given that I know most of the people there were Somali people and probably 2 or more different tribes that were there. So were they the same paralegals that you introduced in the area? And also, how did you address the gender issues, or rather, how did you ensure that gender issues were addressed, given that some areas, they prefer the men to be the ones that talk, that make the decisions there, that do the provision, which is very much okay for the African society. But how did you ensure that also that there was gender inclusivity?
Yeah, these are different committees, because the committees for the farms, for the irrigation, for water are different committees. We had issues with the peace, and the problem of peace was that the community had a problem with the river, accessing the river. The pastoralists had a problem of accessing the river, and the farmers were blocking the pastoralists from accessing the river. So we had to do a lot of training about natural resources to tell them that according to the Constitution of Kenya, the natural resources, including land, including the rivers, these ones belong to everybody. They don't belong to a certain community. So when we do these trainings, then we realized that the problem that was happening was the pastoralist would allow a child to go with a big flock of animals, and the animals, particularly during or after harvest, they would put the animals into the people's farms, seeing that nothing is happening, and also when the crops are being planted, when they are just growing up, again they would allow the animals to go there, and then they would say that, you know, these animals are not intelligent, and therefore you cannot blame an animal, because an animal just sees food, and therefore cutting it or hurting it because it has seen food and it is eating food, you're being very unfair. Okay, of course, that's one part of the argument. There is the other part, that what you are also doing is you're destroying somebody's farm. You're destroying somebody's assets. So we had to design also committees for peace. And the committees for peace included each village having people who are respected, having also women who are also respected, because also during conflict, women are usually part of the problem, and so are the youth, because the youth are the ones that go to war. The elders are the ones who send the youth. The women are the ones who do a lot of talking, that funds and makes the war, or rather escalates the war. So because of these issues, we had to make sure that in a peace committee, you include the youth, the women, and also you include the elders. So these committees, one of their main aspects, for example, was to make sure that the pastoralists have access to water. And how do we do that? We had corridors. We made corridors, big areas where 100 animals can pass, like a road. You make things like roads that go to the river. And when the road reaches the river, you also make sure that the river where it is going, it is also dug in a way that animals can drop into the river and drink the water. But also as you do that, you also put a crocodile barrier so that the animals are not eaten by the crocodiles. So the work of the Peace Committee was to make sure that these corridors have protected the farms. And the farmers, therefore, had also the responsibility to make sure that their area is protected, also on the side of the river, so that animals don't get in. And also the pastoralists had also to have their own peace committees. And if an issue comes, it has to be discussed. But sometimes there were some challenges. For example, at one time, there were donkeys in Wenje village that nobody knew where they had come from. And there were very many. And these donkeys were disturbing everybody in the village, and people were asking who owns one of these villages. The community of the farmers started to kill the donkeys. And that is when the owners came up and they say, wow, these are our animals. And then Peace Committee had to be involved. Peace committees also came in to solve issues about anything that came in the villages and reporting issues to the police. Sometimes if an issue goes to the police, then the committee can go and remove it. Sometimes the police needed minutes for a case to be withdrawn because some things were fairly criminal. Then, when you come to gender issue, when we were working in Tana River, I realized that women, a single woman was working for 17 hours daily. And this was a problem because the woman was doing everything. But women were also not in decision making. They were left out of decision making and they were overworked. And so the best thing to do was to make sure that all the women are also on the decision making table. So we made it illegal for a committee not to have at least 3 out of 8. If a committee is made of 8 people, then 3 must be women. And also these women, they have to have one has at least one has to be in the executive, so that when decisions are being made, issues of women are brought in. So we factored in the issue of women, both in the committees, in the central committees, in all the village committees, in the deep committees, in the irrigation committees, in all the committees. The peace component was also very successful because also the peace committee had access also to the county steering group, because we were members. Sometimes we would go with them, and sometimes we would have a sitting with the county commissioner and also with the senior government officials. So I also remember one time at the bridge there in Majengo, there were some police who were harassing the young people, taking bribes. And we had to talk with the OCPD, with the OCS. We had to talk about it, and that problem was solved. So peace committees were both ways. And also the issue of peace committees, We also trained paralegals. The paralegals now, this would deal with other issues other than on top of peace. For example, they would also look at the issue of safeguarding about the children, education of the children, that to make sure that all the children, because it was the time of President Kibaki, where education was free, to make sure that everybody is going to school. So the paralegals would enforce that and would work with the chief to support the system of the government so that the children can go to school, and they would also be in the court places where they can talk for the community, because a lot of people don't know how to talk for themselves. When they see a magistrate, they fear very much. So the paralegals would come in also there, and they would also do the other aspects like talk about the natural resources and access to them, and support the community for these matters.
Thank you, Father, for that information, and especially hearing that the women were talking too much instead of contributing to the peace of the community. I believe it's also our mandate to ensure that we talk less and preach more about the enhancement of peace or other peaceful initiatives. But we're also grateful that you were able to bring in the gender aspect and ensure that women were also present in the decision-making processes of the community. So moving forward, my other question would be on agroecology. So you did offer training on seed selection and permaculture. There's something called permaculture, right? So how did you ensure that the community itself adapted to that, especially with the environmental changes that happen every now and then because of climate change, and ensure that there was also redundancy in the use of monoculture?
Thank you very much. Yes, after we got the water for irrigation, it was now possible to do agroecology, because agroecology is a different kind of agriculture. It is an agricultural system that uses ecological principles. It is a system that nature is complemented and there is no competition. Instead, it is complements. So during the time that we worked there, we introduced agroecology, and agroecology has the aspect of the permaculture. Permaculture is where you design your farm. You design it from your house up to the end, so that maybe near your house is where you have your kitchen garden. After the kitchen garden, you'll have the orchard. After the orchard, and around there, you can also have other animals like chicken. Then you can have bigger animals in the next level. Then you can also have food forests around there. Then you continue like that up to where you have the bigger area of having timber. So that we train the community on how to do permaculture in their own compounds, so that your farm is arranged in such a way that there is energy flow, the water is well used, and all that. So agroecology is a very important aspect in the farming, because it has something to do with also soil building, deep soil penetration, intensive farming, crop rotation, companion farming, then calorie farming, carbon farming. A lot of aspects are there in agroecology. So we introduced this because we had water. Because with water, you could do all these things. And when we introduced this agroecology, we had to first of all consult the community and explain to them that it's also in very few words, it is just like doing the natural farming, where we go back to our traditional way of doing farming, where when a farmer went to their farm, they would get all kinds of foods in the farm. You'll get potatoes, you'll get fruits, you'll get sugarcane, so that when you go, you eat your lunch in the field itself, like you have food forest there. So we train the community on all these aspects. We train them on kitchen gardening, we train them on water conservation, we train them on soil building. We included several trainings that empowered the community to make agriculture a business, so that you have a place where you can plant your immediate crops, your immediate needs, and then you also can plant the other thing. We also train the community on seed selection. Seed selection is a very important component, because seed selection assists the community to preserve the seed, the purity of the seed gene. It preserves the biodiversity, and the problem therefore had been that in 2012, the Crop Act of 2012 criminalized sharing of seeds, and by criminalizing sharing of seeds, it is unconstitutional, because the Constitution allows sharing of indigenous seeds and their preservation. The Parliament is supposed to make laws that support smallholder farmers to be able to preserve seeds, because it's very expensive to always buy seeds every season. But the best seeds to be selected are the open pollinated seeds. So we train the community on how to do that. And in mind, we knew that there is a law that is criminalizing this. So what we wanted to do was to have critical mass. A critical mass means we talk to community to such an extent that a bigger population understands agroecology. If a bigger population understands agroecology, then they can be able to petition Parliament, so that this law, first of all, which is already there, may either be deleted or changed. And also the recognition of seed sharing and seed selection may also be accepted in Parliament. So we trained the community, and the community was sharing, because in African culture, sharing of seeds improves biodiversity. It is because the seeds, the hybrid seeds, do not have already been, they cannot propagate any genetic good, because they have already been crossed.
In 2018, you were recognized as a hero by the government of Kenya. How has that improved your engagements with the local and even international partners, those most especially who really supported your work at Tana River County?
Thank you very much. The recognition by the government of Kenya in 2018 October came along because of these interventions that I have mentioned, namely the livestock improvement program, the solar irrigation, the peace component, and the agroecological aspects of the community, and involving the community and changing the whole community getting empowered. So therefore the government recognized me as a hero for these matters and rewarded me. The impact of that recognition was huge to the community, because the community really appreciated the work we had done together, and they could see that the government can see what people do and the impact that it had on the community. So the community was very grateful also to the government for this recognition. The partners that we worked with were also happy that the impact, because each project, each program, the measure is the impact to the community. And the impact of the projects we did to the community are long lasting. They are permanent almost, because everything that we started, for example, the livestock improvement program, we did that very well. The solar irrigation, we did that very well. The Peacebuilding, we did that excellently. And then the component of agroecology also, we did it very well. So you only know that it went well because of the impact that is there on the ground. The impact on the ground is huge. The community still recognizes what we did together. The donors that we were working with immediately upscaled their programs. They upscaled their programs. We included more beneficiaries. More beneficiaries came and they benefited from the projects. The donors also brought other people also to support us. And since that time, actually, the impact on the ground is huge, completely huge. And the impacts are still visible today. If you go there, you still find them. And they have been also, for me, I feel very much humbled, because it was a good thing also for myself, because
Yes.
I could see that I did not waste my time.
There was an impact.
There was an impact, and that the work I did, although it was not easy, because we had to really brush shoulders several times with anybody who interfered with the work, and eventually we harvested really what we planted. So it was a good thing. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, to my last question. Your doctoral thesis focused on the vulnerability of the smallholder farmers in Tana River. Could you briefly state about it? And I think also there was something to do also with Tanzania, right?
Yes. So as I had introduced myself earlier and spoken about the works that I did in Tanzania, I worked in northern Tanzania among the Maasai community, and I could see how they were struggling about water and natural resources. When I came to the Tana River, I could also see, also in southern Ethiopia, the Borana community, who are also pastoralists. And then in now Kenya, when we worked with the Pokomo and the Waldei, again I could see the same trend. The trend is that these communities are affected by two disasters, namely floods and drought. These disasters are cyclic. Originally, drought used to come after every 7 or so years. Sorry. Now, It comes after 3, even sometimes 2 years. The same to floods. So what has happened is that climate has changed to such an extent that we have now frequent droughts, frequent floods. But not only that, we have them in a bigger magnitude. So the floods are more severe, the droughts are more severe. So with this in mind, I tried to see what is it that is causing this, and how can we intervene in terms of policy. And so I decided to do a thesis on the vulnerability of smallholder farmers, looking at how exposed the community is, how exposed they are to drought. And I did this for the last 35 years. I looked at how the community has been exposed, how many droughts have come, how has drought changed in the 35 years. I looked at floods, how the community has been affected by floods. And so here I was looking at exposure to floods, exposure to drought. I was looking at how sensitive the crops are to drought, because when there is drought, the crops wilt, they wither, and they dry out. When there is floods, crops are washed away. So the crops are exposed and the crops are sensitive, and this affects the community. So how do we intervene? So you intervene by improving or introducing adaptive capacity to the community. You train the community on how to adapt to floods, how to adapt to drought, and how to cope. So if you intervene in capacity building, training on prevention of floods, and cushioning the community, when you do that, then you are solving the problem. You are making the community less vulnerable. The community becomes less vulnerable if and when their capacity to cope with floods is improved. When they have left the riverbank and they are now working on the upper ground. When they are using systems like solar irrigation instead of using electricity, which is expensive. So my thesis was on these aspects, and the way forward was to recommend that the government and the partners need to promote small irrigation schemes, small village irrigation schemes that are manageable by the community and that can feed the community, because 75% of the farmers in Kenya are women. 90% of the Kenyans depend on about 5 million Kenyans, smallholder farmers, that are working in the farms, and 80% of the people are living in the rural areas. So, if the government can promote small irrigation, small village irrigation schemes, this will provide food security for the community. This will provide food security for the villagers. And when they use clean energy to do this kind of work, also they are promoting climate mitigation. They are promoting
resilience,
and they are helping the community to cope and be able to deal with these aspects, because we are supposed to retain the climate at the current less than 2 degrees, at least in the next so many years. But already the heat, it's already overheating at the moment. And so our recommendation was that use clean energy, because it is cheap, it is affordable, it is accessible. So if the government can support these farmers, if the government can promote, if the government can have policy that will do this justice for the small Christian, for the smallholder farmers, then the food security in Kenya is going to improve. Also, the issue of agroecology, that the issue of agroecology needs to be promoted, because it is the agroecology that is going to solve the problem of food security, because it is natural, it is looking at the whole agricultural component, and it uses ecological principles, and it is rich in both environmental, social, and economical aspects of this. So that was our recommendation for the basis.
So would you say probably this was the transformative work that you did? You can just probably mention it as we wrap up, and also to that person who's listening to you right now, what will be your word to encourage them?
Yes. So these are the transformative aspects that we did, say, in the last 20 years, and that is livestock improvement was very transformative.
Yes.
It transformed the community from what they had in terms of assets, the knowledge they had, and the sustainability. The improvement of irrigation scheme from floods receded irrigation to solar powered village irrigation schemes was very transformative. It is assisting the community as we talk now. You can go and check that in Tana River, in Wenje ward. Then also the issue of the peace component, involving everybody in peace building, so that you can have peace, because people are fighting over resources.
Yes.
And then the issue of agroecology, where it is embracing all the components of the scientific components of agriculture. So I encourage everybody, particularly people who are working in the field of development, to stop doing piecemeal in development. When you are doing development, do it with one heart. Yeah? Do it with one heart. Do it for the intention of changing the community, not for any other show.
Self-interest.
Yeah, self-interest. Just do it for the community, and the impact are going to be as good as the impact that I personally has left behind. I'm very happy about it. I'm very happy about my past life there in Wenje, and I thank God that all these things happened. Thank you very much. Yes.
Wow. Well, Father, this is really good to hear from you. And of course, I know we and those who are listening to us right now are really proud of the work that you have done, and you indeed left a legacy for even the government itself to recognize your work. And that is why we had to feature you in this program that we have on Africa, the continent of hope. This is where we talk hope and we let others know that there's always a solution to every problem that we face as a community and also as an individual. So thank you, Father, for joining us here for this program under the African Union Catholic Chaplaincy. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Having set aside 6 acres of land for cash and food crop farming, famously known as agribusiness, the community expects this project to be of great benefit to its residents.
Tunashukuru, hatuna mambo ya kwenda tena mtoni, tunateka maji kwa tap. Alafu shambani wametusaidia, wametupunguzia umaskini. Wakati tutakapoenda kulima, tukipata chakula, tunaenda kupata msaada. Na hata upande wa mapato tukipata tunauza, tunawasaidia watoto wetu mashuleni.
Mission Kara, through Father Peter Ndegwa, does not only want to better the income levels and end food insecurity for the residents of Tana River County, but through this project, it also aims at restoring peace among the warring communities.
The advantage of having this water is that the community, this brings peace, because when the pastoralists have water, then they don't frequent the river, and when they don't frequent the river, then they reduce the risk of their animals, going to the farmers' farms and eating their crops.
So thank you for joining us too. Stay tuned, subscribe to our program, Africa, the Continent of Hope.